Well, first, Scott, thank you for this very kind introduction. I don't know where you found this photograph of me showing something to people at NIH. I have no idea. But anyway, let's go far away from NIH to Australia. This is a mural in Sydney, which I like a lot. It shows some of the interesting animals that you find in Australia, a platypus and a koala, and it is painted in a very attractive style that the indigenous Australians, also called First Peoples of Australia, have developed over a number of years and that are very successful. So now, before I get to really talking to you about my trip, I would like a small introduction about that has something to do with explaining the title here, this question of where birdsong evolved in Australia. And that's something that I have to confess I was not aware of, but while I was preparing this talk, I came upon an article in The Guardian that was published about a year ago, if I remember correctly, and that had to do with important changes in our way of viewing how birds originated in Australia, how they evolved, etc. And that has quite interesting consequences actually for bird songs all over the world. So let me go first, just in case someone doesn't know where Australia is. You can see here, it looks in this view from Google Map, Australia looks actually quite small in the middle of between the Indian and South Pacific Oceans. But Australia is actually quite large and its surface is about 80% of the surface of the United States, but it has about a tenth of the number of people. Australia has not always been there in the middle of these oceans, because if we go back a little bit some time ago, about 250 million years ago, what was going to be Australia was part of what we call Pangaea, a supercontinent, which divided into Laurasia and Gondwana land. And then these two supercontinents started to fragment into the continents that we kind of know now. I put a little green tag here on what was going to become Australia. And it was originally attached to this landmass, which would become Antarctica. They did not separate until actually more recently than is indicated here, about 45 million years ago. And Australia then started moving up north. And interestingly, it is still moving up north at the speed of about 5 centimeters per year. I have added here a red dot for passerine precursors. So this is something that has been learned recently by conjugation of DNA hybridization work that was started first in 1970, interestingly by a scientist named Charles Sibley, who has nothing to do with David Sibley, the illustrator and guide writer. Charles Sibley and his colleague Alquist were the first ones to do a lot of DNA work to try to compare different bird species and see whether they were similar or not similar. That was important work. At the same time, there was a lot of work on the biogeography, on the evolution of the continents themselves. And eventually putting everything together, it was understood that the passerine precursors, which may have been corvids, may have been so some completely different birds than what the passerines look like now, originated in Gondwana land. And as these continents or future continents were separating, the precursors of the passerines seem to have been carried away by what was to become Australia. It is possible that they were elsewhere, but in the time that has passed, there were a number of major extinctions, and it is possible that they have been extinguished anywhere, somewhere else. So what happened then is that as Australia took kind of its current, more or less current position, at the time it was quite isolated. And it's only when some islands were formed by volcanic activity between Australia and New Guinea that the birds were able to actually disperse from Australia to the rest of the, pretty much to the rest of the world. And that may sound like a quite a striking statement, but it really appears that all the songbirds that are pretty much everywhere or originated and evolved in Australia. And that was a very, a complete reversal of what many, let's say, ornithologists and both in and outside Australia believed until recently. Because they thought that the Australian birds were a little bit inferior to some other birds. When the British settlers who started living in Australia a few centuries ago thought that the birds were not particularly interesting. They were aggressive, they were noisy, they didn't know how to sing, and they thought that these birds had all migrated from somewhere else and had failed to continue to evolve. Anyway, there was a relatively negative, condescending view of the Australian birds. And now, of course, we're in a completely different situation where actually Australia gave to the bird, to the world, the birds that we enjoy and hear sing. Okay, so this was my small introduction on this new concept, and now a few numbers, and after that I'll stop with the numbers, and except for the numbers of birds that I have seen. Sorry, I still see some admissions. Okay. There are about 85 families of birds, including 33 of the passerines, about 900 species, according to Wikipedia. 165 of those are vagrants, they're accidental. But 45% of the remaining 898 minus 165 are endemic, which is a very, very high percentage. Of course, not all species have the same percentage of endemic birds. And there are also some unusual species that have very high numbers of, some birds like the parrots, for example, also originated in Australia and have 56 species, and only 5 of those are found in different countries. There are about 75 honey eater species, and et cetera. And to make matters more diverse and sometimes more complicated, there are many subspecies that are called in the guides that I have, sometimes forms, sometimes races. I've seen the word subspecies only on the web. Okay, so now if I can move ahead again. That's interesting. I don't know, for some reason I have problems. Oh, okay, here, that will be better. So now let me tell you a little bit about the trip. So I went to Australia I left the United States on September 29th and left Australia on October 18th. So that was about 3 weeks. I went with a good friend, Evelyn. We have been friends since middle school in Brussels, just a few years ago. And she's been living in the United States for as long as I have, but she's in Chicago. She's a physicist and sleep specialist and gets invitations all over the world quite frequently. And has occasionally I have benefited from her travels because she's asked me to come along. Sorry, let me. So in 2012, she had two invitations, one to spend 2 days working in Melbourne and one to spend 3-4 days at a meeting in Darwin in the so-called top end of Australia. And she decided it would be a good opportunity to spend some time around Melbourne, which she had not visited before, and also in the Red Centre to fly to Alice Springs and see a very famous site, the Rock of Uluru. So she asked me if I wanted to go along with her, and of course I was not going to say no because it sounded like it would be a great trip. But I must say that I didn't know that much. I really didn't know very much about Australia, and I didn't know much about Australian birds. So Australia had not been on my so-called bucket list of places which I wanted to see before dying. But then I started talking to a few people in the club around me, and the first one that I talked to was Don Messersmith, who's here tonight. And I told Don that I was going to go to Australia, and he was very enthusiastic. He said, I love Australia. I've been, I don't remember if it was 12 times or 8, but quite a number of times. It was his favorite birding country. So I thought, okay, that starts to sound really good. And Don helped me more. He loaned me some books. We talked. He gave me some advice of where to go. This was great. So thank you very much, Don. Then I started talking to Gail, and Gail also was extremely helpful. She gave me some very detailed notes that she had taken after her after Barry's and her 2 trips to Australia. She got me in touch with someone she knew in Darwin who helped me find some guides. And she also introduced in my brain the notion of using Birding Pal to find the guides. So one detail that I did not mention is that Eve is not a birder. So I knew I was going to have a few days when I could bird full time because she was going to be working. But there were other days when she expected that I would be hiking with her, and I would of course look at the birds that were around, but not be focused completely on birding. But anyway, it went very smoothly. And finally, I want to thank Jim Tate. Again, while I was preparing this trip, I was at some point at the bookstore Politics and Prose, and Jim and his wife Lynn happened to be there. I was actually looking for some books by Australian authors, because when I go to a country, I like to read something written by their authors before I go there. And so Jim was very helpful. Turns out that his son was living there at the time, and he's sent me some information recently as well. So thank you to all of you, to all 3 of you. So on October, with the time change and the loss of time, it takes a while to get to Sydney. Eve flew to Melbourne, but I flew to Sydney, which I wanted to visit, and where I had also arranged to give a seminar to some colleague of mine at the end of the trip. But on the first day, I arrived, dropped my suitcases at the hotel, and immediately walked downtown. And if you look at the small map I have here, I was somewhere here taking this photo with the famous Sydney Opera to the right, which you can see here. This bridge is also quite well known. And I wanted to go next to just on the right, at the Sydney, at the Royal Botanic, Royal Botanic Garden, which Don had recommended. And later in the day, my intention was to take a ferry and go to the zoo, Taronga Zoo. I thought it would be a good way to be outside all day to get rid of any jet lag and also encounter my first Australian birds. So one of the most abundant, most common bird is the sulfur-crested cockatoo. And I'm going to play a few, some sound for a few of the birds. And I won't let it go very long, but this is supposed to give you an idea of the atmosphere in the park. It was very, actually very lively. The Australians are not totally enamored of their sulfur-crested cockatoos because they're quite destructive, and you don't know if this bird is trying. This is a fountain in the botanic garden, but I don't know if the bird is hoping to get some water or to get a piece of the fountain. Anyway, the other. Okay, sorry. The other very frequent, very common bird in that park, and surprisingly in the city, is the white ibis, whose sound is also quite strange. Okay, it sounds not exactly like a bird. Let me stop it. Okay. But quite nice and quite large for a very common bird. So continuing to walk in the botanic garden, I encountered much more cheerful, smaller parrots, the rainbow lorikeet, fairly gregarious bird. You see here a little group. Okay. And this is one of the birds that comes with, that at the time had a subspecies. You can see here a green band on the nape. There's another bird that has a red band and that lives in the north of Australia. At the time it was a subspecies, but now it is a full species. So I realized that I have one more species in my tally from Australia. Here is a montage of several birds, and I'll put two of the calls together. So this is really what you would hear in the botanic garden, and it was actually quite lively. Okay. The most exciting bird is the one in the center, although my photo was really not good at all. I was trying to see a magpie or similar bird in a tree. The magpie left, but then I realized that there was a much bigger bird in the tree, and it was a powerful owl, which is the biggest owl that you can see in Australia. And that was practically an hour after I had been in Sydney. So I thought, okay, this is really promising, looks good for birding. And then the other ones, it's interesting, there's an Australian wood duck, which is quite pretty, but does not resemble, of course, our wood ducks at all. The noisy miners, well named. The masked lapwing, whereas this, it looks like this bird was getting ready for a pandemic. It has another subspecies with long wattles that hang from this mask. And then this kind of a corvid-like bird, and this is a baby magpie. October being, of course, the beginning of the spring in Australia, I encountered a few families of birds, and also you will see some photos with birds holding nesting material in their bill. So I think that's it for the, sorry, when I press on the forward, okay. A little bit later, I took a small ferry that was very pleasant, and got to the Taronga Zoo, where I went to the Australian section, and I will just show you two birds. One is the emu, the largest Australian bird, about 2 meters, about 6.5 feet from the bill to the tail, and a very strange look. And some people say, yes, you can really see the dinosaur when you look at an emu, and you can see how it can have evolved from them. The emus exist in bands in the wild. I did not encounter any wild emus. I encountered 1 or 2 more, not in a zoo, but they did not seem to be completely wild. This beast can run actually quite fast. It can achieve speeds of about 30 miles per hour running. So that must be very impressive to see. Sorry, this. And the other animal that I want to show you from the zoo is a laughing kookaburra, really iconic Australian bird. And that's the last bird sound that I will play, because I really find it quite entertaining. And you know, we think that we have laughing birds because we have laughing gulls, but their sound has nothing to do with really laughing compared to this one. Okay, so I hope you're convinced that he's in a really good mood. The kookaburra is actually a kingfisher, and I will talk a bit later about the two. There are 2 types of kingfishers in Australia, and he's the one. He's from the species that does not fish. The kingfishers that do not fish, but actually eat invertebrates, small snakes. They live in general in forests, and they do not have the thin pointed bill that can spear a fish, but a flatter, wide bill. Okay, so that was, I saw a few more birds. I had about 20 birds and quite a number of lifers. For a first day, I thought it was pretty good. I went also walking a bit more, discovering Sydney. But the next day was quite exciting, because the next day I took a local train. This is again the Sydney, the kind of the same map, but at a completely different scale. I took a local train for about an hour to get somewhere here, and to meet a man named Aaron Davis, whum I had found through Birding Pal. And I asked him if he would take me around, and he accepted, which was great. He was a very good birder, and also I had seen some photos he had posted. He was a very good photographer, and you'll see I will mention some of his other bird-related talents, which impressed me very much. So we stayed mostly in this area that I have surrounded by a square here, so northwest of Sydney. this area contains quite a number of ponds, of one national park, another park, lagoons, pit town bottoms, which I find an interesting name. And this was the landscape for much, but of course not all of the day. And when we first got in touch, he was actually met on that day. Aaron asked me if I had target birds, and I said that I found the parrots quite interesting and quite attractive. But he was a bit disappointed. He said that parrots are a bit too much in your face, and he would show me, we would certainly meet some, but he would show me some more interesting birds as well. So I thought it was fine. And indeed, we saw a lot of small, very pretty, very interesting birds. So one of the first one that we encountered is named Varicitella, and it is known as the Australian nuthatch. And I'm sure you can understand why, because you see the bird with the head downwards and the bill pointed outwards from the tree. It looks for insects in the bark of the trees. Actually, in terms of real, if you look at the DNA and if you really analyze the stela, it has really nothing to do with our nuthatches. But there was a certain resemblance, hence the name, and that was often the case. You have a number of Australian robins that have nothing to do with our or with the European robins, but they had some similarities in the colors, and that was enough for the names to be chosen. The Varicitella has 5 subspecies, so I think that's probably one of the birds with the most. I've seen birds with 5 or 6 subspecies. I think not more, fortunately. That increases the number of birds that you can encounter. Each subspecies is pretty much in a different part of Australia, except two species that are probably both found here on the southeast. We also encountered a number of small birds that are known as the Australian warblers. The gerygony is the bird, not necessarily this one, but is a bird that is often considered as a true Australian warbler, as are the fairy wrens, the thornbills. I think the spotted pardalote is not. These are all fairly pretty birds, and the spotted pardalote was particularly interesting. We got to a clearing, and Aaron Davies took a box out of his car, and he put the box on the ground, and then he took a few small wood carvings, and which he had made himself and painted, and which represented several different small birds that you could expect to see there, including the spotted pardalote. And he told me where to put myself with my camera, and he said, be ready, because they're quite fast. And in fact, they were so fast. A few of them came, went, but so fast that I never got a single shot of them. So I wanted to see again what they look like and to share these pretty birds with you. And I found this absolutely wonderful photo on eBird by David Ongley. I don't know him, but I found him twice for the only photos that where I did not have anything to show you. We also started getting to the honey eaters. So you would perhaps expect that there are common features in the structure, the shape, the bill shape of the honey eaters, but this is really not the case. You can see this eastern spinebill has this long curved bill, whereas the bell minor has a very short, kind of stubby bill. And so the honey eaters have very different shapes, and of course they feed from different trees, different forms of nectars or sap, or sometimes a kind of a sweet powder called lerp. And it sounds like the aridity of the climate in Australia favors the growth of trees like the eucalypts and the banksias, which have very tough leaves and produce some sweet stuff that the birds like, but that also likes the birds to being noisy and fighting between themselves. The pigeons, another very interesting category, especially here, the top-knot pigeons. I could not get closer to them, and so I looked again on eBird for a photo, and completely independently found a photo by the same David Onley. And I think that you can appreciate the interesting shape of the top knot in question. We also that day saw a common bronzewing, nice, very nice, pretty colors, quite sophisticated pigeon. Next were the parrots. A few nice ones of different, these are not, the little corella is also a cockatoo. Cockatoos are large parrots of fairly uniform color. The little corella has, I have no idea what this structure is around the eye, but I find it fascinating. And each time I see this photo, I notice that there is something, maybe a thorn that's in the bird's bill. And I'm thinking of calling for some rescue. Crimson Rosella, and this red drum parrot was, it was a little bit like the bird that Anziani was photographing. It was on the curb in front of a small church in a small village which we were crossing, and Aaron drove just very slowly while I was taking photos through the window. Let's see, continuing. At the end of the afternoon, we were in the area of the ponds, and of course, I was impressed by this black swan. I think it was the first I was seeing. Whereas the other birds were interesting, but their structure was very similar to that of ours. There are quite a number of herons in Australia, only one pelican, certainly quite a number of ducks, and I did see many ducks, many herons. The black swan. And this was also my first kangaroo. Not a great photo, but it's the only kangaroo that I have met where I think you can see here the head of the young one that's kind of sticking, must be in the pocket. The kangaroo looked at us, did not seem to be particularly fazed, did not stay, but did not seem to be scared either. And finally, the last bird of the day was for me the kind of cherry on the cake, because I had also hoped to see a rainbow bee eater, and in the late afternoon light, it was very nice. So it was a really fantastic day. If I remember correctly, I think I wrote down, I had 67 lifers out of 82 species. So I think that that's certainly one of the best birding days I've ever had. And so fantastic day. The next day, I changed landscape completely. I flew to Melbourne, met Eve at the airport. So here's a little map. Met her at the airport. She had picked up the car we were renting, and we started driving down the road that goes here south of Melbourne. And our goal was to get not very far to a place called Skins Creek. It's a very small place along the ocean, with a place that has cabins and a very good restaurant, very informal but really delicious, where we were going to celebrate the first being together for this trip and talk about the plans we had. After that, the next day, we were going to continue, go here along an area that has what's called the 12 Apostles. I think that Clive actually has shown us once some photos from Australia with one from the 12 Apostles. And after that, we were going to continue and drive a bit north to visit the Grampians National Park. That seemed interesting. We stopped a few times along the ocean, and here I noticed when I was putting my photos together that this guy who was, I think, paddling on his surfboard actually looked very similar to the great cormorants, because he has this black body and then this lighter colored heads and feet. There's also, so there are 4 great cormorants here and 1 pied cormorant with them. This is views the next morning at Skins Creek. The first thing I saw on the deck of my bedroom was a cockatoo, a sulfur-crested cockatoo. I didn't let him come in. And this was the view of Skins Creek from, again, from the cabin, very pretty. Before breakfast, Eve went for a jogging, and I went for a little birding and encountered this bristle bird, which is not a very common bird, but I was surprised. It fans its tail when it is worried, when it is stressed. And I saw it open its tail a little bit. It didn't seem too bad, but anyway, I didn't spend too much time bothering him. After that, I was very happy to see another of these fairy wrens, the so-called superb blue wren. And then I have something actually that Scott may be interested in, at least as photo of female bird, but this is a quite disappointing thing. The female of the super blue wren is really a kind of poster child for the famous sentence that the females are generally not as colorful as the males. And this is really a bit sad. I think it's nearly exaggerated. Although I have been noticing that the bill of the female is really matching the color of the feathers around the eyes. And that's actually quite pretty. So it's not so bad. So then we continued on the road. These are the first 2 of the 12 apostles. These are sandstones, structures that have been separated from the mainland. And as we continued on our road towards the Grampians, I noticed some birds from the road and stopped. There was a pair of black swans with the young swans. Very nice to see. They were quite far away, but it was nice to see them nevertheless. And we arrived in the Grampians, and we stayed again in a fairly large cabin, actually a place called Hall Gap. And the next morning, the first thing that we saw outside the cabin were these kangaroos with a young, but not in a pocket. Very nice to observe. And the red wattle bird, which is a honey eater. The wattle is that small reddish appendage here, and This bird is probably fairly young because the size of the wattle increases with age. And I've seen images or photos of wattle birds with a definitely larger wattle than this one. This is a view from the Grampians. These are old mountains, not very sharp, but very good for hiking, very, very pretty. I did see a number of birds, but nothing. I sometimes saw them get into a bush and could not get a photo or an ID from them. So the birding was not fantastic, but it was a very nice day. So now continue. We went back to Melbourne and flew to the center of Australia to Alice Springs. When I showed you the Google Maps view of the world and Australia in the center, when I look at that, I have a feeling that Australia is very small compared to the other continents. And that was my feeling when I first looked at a map. And when Eve and I were talking on the phone to prepare this trip, we discussed about flying to Alice Springs and then how we were going to get to Uluru, which is next to where you have here this Ulara. And I said, well, the two places look like they're exactly next to one another, which was true on the map I was looking at. There must be a shuttle. And she called me back, laughing her head off about 10 minutes later, saying, well, the distance is 440 kilometers or about 300 miles. So they may be shuttles, but not exactly what we have in mind. So of course, we rented a car and drove for about 5 hours. The landscape was quite beautiful, occasionally a bit monotonous. This is, I think, the spinifex grass. Some birds are named spinifex something, but I never encountered them. They are flowers also. But you know, it is quite dry, and when you leave Alice Springs, you go down south. At the first intersection here, you turn right, and that's it. And at the intersection, there's a large complex, a garage, a store, a restaurant. Besides this, I don't think that we have seen anything on the road, or maybe something further where we could have bought water or something like that. So you better be ready. This reminds me, of course, that the Australians drive on what we consider to be the wrong side of the road, but we got used after a while. And this is the famous Uluru Rock. This is sacred to the First Peoples of Australia, and it is now forbidden for tourists to climb. Which tourists liked to do. We did not think it would be a good idea. And the day when we were there, it was too hot. It was closed to climbing anyway. So what we did there is that we hiked all around it. It's about 5 miles, and it was quite doable. It was not too hot when we started. This is another view of the rock when you're closer. It's very striking. And there are some cave paintings, although only the ones that are not very elaborate are open to photography. There were some much better ones, but which you cannot photograph. These are some of the birds that we encountered in this very dry landscape. A little wood swallow, and I have to confess I don't know that much about the wood swallow, but I don't think that they are really typical swallows. I mean, because we saw some. And the pied butcher bird. The butcher birds are known to impale their prey on thorns. And I thought that maybe they were doing that because we saw some trees with impressive thorns, but actually I read that these butcher birds mostly use their capacity to press their prey to put it, for example, in the fork of a tree or of a bush, something like that, but do not impale them so much. We saw a few more interesting birds. A fairly pretty honey eater, so-called white plumed. A crested pigeon, not as pretty. There is a spinifex pigeon, but we did not encounter it. But this is again with these kind of very pretty iridescent feathers. And the gala, a cockatoo that is common all over Australia. This is a view, I think that our rooms were somewhere here. But anyway, this was the hotel where we were staying, which was quite attractive. And about gala, Aaron Davies, my guide on the first day, had told me that the word gala, representing this rather large cockatoo that's not extremely fast, is used sometimes as a nickname for a politician that's not terribly active, as a kind of a moniker, or he's a gala. So, okay, I was pleased to be told about some local uses of the bird names. I think that my next slide is when, yes, we left Uluru, got back to Alice Springs. On the way back, we saw a flock of budgies not far from the car, but could not stop and photograph them, but that was quite nice. And we flew to Darwin. It was not a very long flight, about 2 hours. And in Darwin, thanks to Gail's friend, I had 3 guides, actually a pair, Meg and Gavin O'Brien for my first day, and then Daryl Binns, aka Biggles, here for the second and third day. And Biggles was very entertaining. He's quite a character, excellent, fantastic birder. He was very kind. He took me quite a distance from Darwin. We went all the way to this Adelaide river near Litchfield National Park. We could not go to there's a very big park near there called Kakadu National Park, but that was really too far for going for just one day. But I really, he showed me so many birds. It was great. There was a fantastic, beautiful looking beach, and I was surprised that there was no one on the beach, and especially no one swimming. But actually, it is very strongly advised. You're strongly advised not to swim there because there are some box jellyfish whose sting is deadly. So it's much better, unless you have, I think, a kind of a full bodysuit. You really should not swim there, unfortunately. So on the first day, I encountered these very strange, these are not exactly the same type of bird. This scrub fowl has very thick legs, and they help it to gather together. It's why it's called a mound builder. It's gathering dirt to cover its eggs. I did not see that. But we also met stone curlews that come in 2 varieties, beach stone curlew and bush stone curlew. And the beach ones have a bill that's quite large for their size, and they're actually fairly shy birds. They're not so easy to see. We were very lucky that these 2 arrived, they landed, and one of them stayed for a while, did not seem to be upset by our presence and by my camera. And interestingly, just after we saw them, we went a little bit off the beach on the grass and in some shade, And there were two guys who looked very much like bird guides. They had a cooler with drinks, obviously for a group of people, and they turned out to be two guys with field guides. And they asked us if we had seen a beachstone curlews, and they were very excited that we had. They hoped that they could show them to their groups. So that was nice. I mean, I was feeling pretty good that I had a chance to see these birds. There are lots of finches, small finches in Australia, and some of them were actually in Beagle's backyard. In the middle of the day, it was much too hot to continue birding. Darwin has a climate that resembles Washington, D.C. on a very hot summer day, so it was hot and humid. So I was wondering where we were going to go get some lunch and mostly some air conditioning. But actually, he took me to his house. His wife very kindly had prepared sandwiches for us, and it was very relaxing and enjoyable moment. And in their backyard, they have a number of bird baths and bird feeders. And you can see, actually, it's not related to the presence of the bird feeder, but this double-barred finch holds some thin thread, I suppose, for building a nest. And the long-tailed finch has some plants also for nesting material, I suppose. And the crimson finch is the closest, perhaps, that I've seen that resembles our cardinals. And the female is not too different from the male here. So here are the kingfishers. And so now these are two more of these forest kingfishers, one actually called forest kingfisher and the other one the sacred kingfisher, wide bill. But we have also the fishing kingfishers, quite a nice bird. And something interesting here, instead of three, they have only two toes, and the two toes are actually fused together. And I realized that I had never really had a close view of the belted kingfisher's feet, never had a chance, but this one was posing nicely for that. Finally, some more honey eaters. Again, same as the series I showed you earlier, different colors, different sizes, different bill shape and lengths. And the blue-faced honey eater looks really amazing. This bird had just been in a bird bath, and that's why he looks so disheveled, but quite interesting. And well, doves and fruit doves. Two doves. I did not want to put too many photos. I don't know how I'm doing here, but we saw certainly quite a number of doves. But this was the nicest. It was a rose-crowned fruit dove, and the fruit doves are not so easy to see. And Gail told me when she asked me when I came back, did you see a fruit dove? And I said yes, and she said, oh, I'm so jealous. Anyway, it was a lovely to have this bird. And finally, some more parrots. My favorite here that looks really cheerful. Let's see what comes next. We were talking about geese, so these are the magpie geese with a very strange shape, with this kind of I don't know what to call this, something on their heads anyway. And finally, the last bird that I will show you for Darwin, the smallest Australian bird, the weebill. So I felt I felt happy that I had started by the emu 2 meters and the weebill, which is 8 to 9 centimeters, about 3.5 inches. So 2 days later, we flew away from Darwin and went back to Melbourne. And in Melbourne, I hoped to find someone from Birding Pal to take me to a well-known water epuration station called Werribee. And I remember also that, Clive has gone there, but somehow I could not find anyone. But even I spent one day going to Phillip Island. So this is Melbourne, and Phillip Island is about 2 hours drive. And Phillip Island is a place where you go to see what's called the Little Penguins Penguin Parade. And I had asked Don, said, Don, I've seen this place to see the little penguins. It looks quite commercial. Is it outrageous? And Don said, no, you should go if you can go. And indeed, he was right. You have a wonderful setup. A part of this island is kept as wild as possible. There were gulls nesting, there were terns, but the main thing was the little penguins. They spent several days at sea feeding, and every night there's a group of them that come back to return to their burrows and feed their family by disgorging some of the fish that they have caught. They first meet in the water, not very far from the shore. Look around to make sure that there's no danger, come ashore, and then walk uphill towards their burrows, and then progressively go left, right, and disappear in their burrows. The place has bleachers from which you can see them when they're in the water and coming out of the water, and then boardwalks that are practically along the path to their burrows. And surprisingly, you're very close to them. You have fantastic views, and they don't see you. So it was great. The only thing is that we were asked not to take any photographs, and we had taken a guide to take us around and explain the whole organization of the place and the mode of life of the little penguins before the show in the evening. And that guy was really extremely helpful and very nice. So I decided to be a good citizen, and I didn't take a single photo of a little blue penguin there, which I'm still regretting to this day, of course. So I was hoping to see some in Melbourne, but somehow I did not get a chance. So this is, we're getting to the end. And there were lots more birds that I got to see and to photographs, but I think this is enough for an evening. In case some of the birds that I saw are, if your favorite bird is included there, I'm very sorry, but anyway, so this is the end. And if you have any questions, I'll be glad to try to answer them. Shall I unmute you? I'll stop sharing. Okay.
Thank you, Evelyn. That was absolutely wonderful. And it brought back very, very fond memories. You saw so many birds I haven't seen. I'm looking forward to my next trip.
Yeah, so am I.
Any of us are. Any trip.
Yes, any trip, yes.
Where did you see the shrike tit?
The shrike tit was in the east. That was on the first day with that guy, Aaron Davis. And this is a bird. It's a single bird in a family, right? It's one of these one bird families. Am I right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think they're thinking of splitting them in the northern, eastern, and western, but right now it's a single bird family, right?
Yeah.
So that's why I asked.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Evelyn, did you see the Regent honey eater?
No, I did not. No. And there's also a regent bowerbird, I think.
So there was a little blurb about the Regent honey eater tonight on BBC News.
Huh.
There's something like 300 plus birds left, and they're so dispersed that they're forgetting their songs.
Ah, yes.
So they have recordings, and they're playing the recordings to help them to continue to know their songs.
Yeah, Jennifer, who's here, sent me actually a message to tell me about it. So I heard about it this afternoon, but not before. Yeah, that's very interesting.
Yeah, if you want to see them, you really have to go now to the Capetry Valley, which is over the Blue Mountains. And we went in 2008, and I think we saw about 25 of them, but they've declined a lot since then.
Yeah, there's also I was a bit worried about the recent fires. Looking on the web, they said that there were fires in the surroundings of Sydney and in near Darwin. So I was really wondering what happened to these areas where I was. But I contacted and I wrote to Aaron Davis and to the other guides. And I had been in contact a little bit with them after the trip, but then, as it often goes, you do not really keep in touch over the years. So I was very happy that both Aaron Davis and Gavin O'Brien responded within 24 hours. And Aaron said that to the best of his knowledge, the place where we birded is fine and actually is getting more birds because there were fires a bit more to the west. And so the birds that normally live more to the west have been flying east to be in an area in better shape. And Gavin O'Brien said that everything had been okay in Darwin. So that was different from what I read on the web, but of course the Darwin area is quite large, so I don't know, and I could not reach Beagles. I'm still try to.
We were there in December, late November, early December in 2019 during the fires, and where we were staying outside Sydney, we were under evacuation warning, and if the fire came quickly, we're supposed to all run out and jump in the swimming pool. Not kidding. And
No, I'm not.
we went up birding. We couldn't get into barren grounds, which is why we wanted to go there, but it was close to a fire danger. But we were able to do some birding, but we had ash and smoke falling on us several days, and the fires were a long distance away, but they can move quickly. So
yeah. Pretty awful.
Yeah.
Wonderful photographs, and there were portraits of the birds. They were just beautiful.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Excellent.
Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, what happened with the cameras is that since I knew we were going to travel quite a lot, all together, I had like 4 days birding with guides, 4 or 5 days of walking, on my own, 4 days of hiking with Eve, and certainly 4 to 6 days of airplanes and traveling, especially if you include the travel between the United States and Australia. So I didn't want, I wanted to travel as light as possible. So I did not take my best camera body. I took my a good lens, but a much lighter single lens reflex Canon. And of course, when I was there, then I thought, oh, you idiots, you know, when you go to a place that has all these birds, you take your best camera, your best setting.
Well, it was
But
wonderful.
anyway,
Beautifully
thank you.
done.
Thank you very much.
Evelyn, you showed a
Yes.
picture of a rufous bristlebird.
Yes,
Do you know that's one of the rarest birds in Australia? And it's, I tried for it 3 times, never saw it. And you're really fortunate to see that bird.
yeah, I realized, you know, most of the birds that I found when I looked in the guide, I would see fairly common, very common. At least none of the birds, I did not encounter any bird that has common in the name, which I thought was very nice for the birds. But this one I saw, it said fairly rare. And so I thought, wow, so I was very happy. But yeah.
Not many people see that.
Huh. I saw some, I was told that the little kingfisher, the very pretty little blue and white kingfisher, was difficult to get, but we just found it, it was just sitting there, you know, ready to be photographed. And there was another bird with a different, very strange sound, which is a whip bird. Which I saw the first day, and Janet, you have seen one or heard one, and they go choo, something like that, very strong sound. And
Evelyn, it's 2 birds.
It's 2 birds.
Evelyn, the male starts the song, and the female finishes it.
Really?
So the bzz is the male, and the snap is the female.
Okay, but that was an amazing sound, and we were in these bushes along a pond, and Aaron Davies, knowing what it was, said, well, I'll leave you here for a few minutes and try to see the bird. And I did eventually see the bird between some leaves, but I don't have really a good photo. But he also said, well, you know, it's good for you that you could see it at all.
Well, next time you have to go along the coast north of Brisbane.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Bowerbirds and other wonderful things up there.
Yeah.
Cassowary.
Yes. And another a bird, the cassowary was not in any of the areas where I went, but what I would have liked to see was the golden finch around Darwin. You know, this is a finch that looks a little bit like a painted bunting. It has different, you know, like the surface of the feathers are divided into geometrical areas of different colors, and it looks quite spectacular, but did not see it.
Because it's so pretty, it's captured by so many people that it's become very rare.
Yeah.
People take it for cage birds. And
that's
they're up near Darwin. There's some up there.
Yeah, that's too sad. Okay, I see that Mark England said that now he must go to Australia. Yes, Mark, you need to go. So I don't know if Australia is open to us at this point, even if we're vaccinated, but I don't know.
I don't think it is.
No, I don't think so either.
And there's no flights either, hardly flights, but yeah, they can go, but you'll have to stay at a hotel for 14 days.
And actually I read in the New York Times, I think this morning, that New Guinea, Papua New Guinea, which was pretty much, which had very few cases of COVID-19, has a spike, although the numbers are, still relatively small, but the population there is small, and the Australians are worried that it's going to come to them. So that's not going to help things, sadly enough. Okay, so if there are no more questions, I thank you for the kind messages from Andy, Janet, Mark, Stella, Maura, and Francesca. Thank you very much to all of you. Thank you for listening to the end. Okay.